Hey everybody, Brett from Love Bets and the Belfry here for another video. This may be a long video. I'm going to talk about some movies. I'm in the mood to talk about some movies today. And I could show off my entire movie collection, but honestly, I mean, not that my, collection of movies is all that, like, huge. I just feel like if I did the entire collection in one video, it would be like a 4-hour video. So I'm going to just do my movie collection starting from numbers, then going to A, and then all the way to the letter D today. So we're going to do that. And I mean, it's best to just pop up and relax. I'm going to be talking a lot, so I think it's best to have a drink with me. So I have a crisp, refreshing Pepsi, and I'm not sponsored by Pepsi. I shouldn't even have said that in this video, but I got some soda here, not Pepsi, and we're gonna get started. So yeah, starting with numbers, let's go. I mean, some of these I might go off on a tangent, so apologies in advance, but here we go. So first up, we have the 4 film favorites of the Stanley Kubrick collection. I put this under number because, like, on the side it says 4 film favorites. And yeah, so, but it has The Shining, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Barry Lyndon, and Eyes Wide Shut. And I have seen, I've seen part of, this is funny, I mean, I'm gonna come off as a fraud here. I have not seen all of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I feel like I'm really into movies and I would have seen that by now, but I just haven't. I just haven't gone around to it. Obviously, The Shining is a classic. I love The Shining. I've seen it way too many times than I could count. I actually have seen Barry Lyndon. That is kind of more underrated of a Stanley Kubrick film. It's really good, though. I would just say it's definitely a film buff type movie. I don't really remember much about it, but all I remember most out of it was the cinematography was just really gorgeous looking. But yeah, one of these days I will get around to watching 2001: A Space Odyssey, because obviously it's up there on every film buff's list, and it's a great movie. But, you know, sometimes those type of movies you just really have to be in the mood for in order to watch it. So yeah, I mean, I think I bought this because it had Barry Lyndon and 2001, but I just never watched 2001 yet. And Eyes Wide Shut, a lot of people say, is also really good, but I just never really gotten around to, or really been in the mood to watch it, honestly. Moving on, we have 4 horror movies. And this is a collection of Return of the Living Dead. I think this was the reason I bought it, so I could have a copy of Return of the Living Dead. I bought this when I worked for FYE like 10 years ago. But it's got, yeah, Return of the Living Dead, Swamp Thing, A Bucket of Blood, which definitely looks up my alley. I mean, look at that freaking artwork. And then one called Frogs. I've heard nothing of Bucket of Blood and Frogs, but I think Swamp Thing was actually Wes Craven's version of Swamp Thing, because I know he was involved in that, but I'd be interested in watching that. Moving on, I hate these crappy rental cases, but this came in one of those. But 28 Days Later, I heard recently they just announced that they're finally doing another sequel to 28 Weeks Later, and it's funny. Like, everyone talks about 28 Days Later, and obviously for good reason, but 28 Weeks Later is also a really good movie. I mean, it's been some time since I've seen it, but I remember going into 28 Weeks Later thinking, like, oh, this isn't going to be that great. And I ended up really loving it. And I don't have a copy of it, but I'd love to rewatch it because I really enjoyed it. Moving on, we have a double feature of the abominable Dr. Phoebes and Dr. Phoebes Rises Again, starring Vincent Price. Yeah, I bought this at FYE like 10 years ago when I worked for them, and I still haven't gotten around to watching these. But one night when I'm in the mood for like some B horror, and Vincent Price is great and everything, you know, so I'll get around to it eventually. This is when I was really into like kind of the hardcore, deathcore, death metal, like seen, but I used to really be into this band, but the Acacia Strain, their DVD, The Most Known Unknown. I still remember loving this DVD. It has two like live shows. First disc is Live at the Palladium, and that's a really awesome show. And then disc 2 is when they played like a more underground show at like this really small club, and everyone's just like piling on top of one another. It's really cool. But yeah, I still occasionally go back and jam this band. Haven't really kept up with their like recent stuff as of at least like probably the last decade. I haven't really kept up with them, but I really love some of their earlier work, like what is it? Their album Continent, and especially Wormwood was like my favorite record of theirs. But this was right before I think Wormwood came out. But yeah, I really enjoyed this, and yeah, their earlier stuff is really good too. I actually showed this off in a previous video. I think I showed it off in a Brett's Horror Vlog video, but this is Action Figure Adventure Season 2. And I showed it off before I even started watching it. But I really enjoyed Season 1 of Action Figure Adventure, and Season 2 is definitely up there. I would say the downside to Season 2 was they filmed it while the shutdown, the pandemic was like still really like going on, and we were in the crosshairs of it. But if you've never heard of this show, it was like these two guys that like self-funded it, and they were trying to go out, hunt down these rare like action figures and collectibles, and then buy them with what, the guys had in their budget, and then end up doing an auction for them. And then all the money that they raised from the auction, they would give to charity. But yeah, Season 2, I also really enjoyed. I think I watched Season 1 twice, but Season 2, I would definitely watch this again. But yeah, like I said, it was during, like the pandemic, like the, in the big scheme of like the pandemic and everything. So like everyone was wearing masks, and like there weren't really people in the stores really at all. So, but still, fun show. Addams Family. This was the complete first volume. I think I don't know how many volumes they released, because they didn't release them by season, but the show was only 2 seasons long. But TV shows way back in the day, their seasons were like 30 some episodes. But this has 22 episodes in this first volume, so it almost feels like the full length of a season, but it's not the full season. But I like the classic Addams Family show. It's fun. I would say the one thing that the movies from the 90s, the Addams Family movies from the 90s, I had like Christina Ricci as Wednesday. Those are, I actually would say those are better than the classic TV show. Like, Wednesday as a character is like barely developed in the TV show. So the movies like really added a lot to her character, and thanks to Christina Ricci, a lot of people love the character of Wednesday Addams, and obviously have gone on to make the show Wednesday and everything. All Souls Day, I think I bought this for like less than $1 at FYE. The reason I bought it is because it has Jeffrey Combs in it, and Jeffrey Combs plays Herbert West in Reanimator, and he's pretty much like, I would say he's like one of my favorite actors because he's so charismatic in everything he's in. But he is in a lot of like not so great stuff, but he is like the highlight of like the not so great stuff. Kind of like Acacia Strain, I used to really be into this band, Alter Bridge, but this was them live from Amsterdam. This was their live concert. This was, built off of, the singer of Creed, was kind of like a huge jerk, and basically all the remaining members of Creed went on to form Alter Bridge with the singer and guitar player Miles Kennedy, and are still going strong today. Yeah, this is like when I used to really love their stuff. I think this is from like their first 2 or 3 records. I think maybe first 2 records of them live in Amsterdam, but I haven't really kept up with their stuff lately. Altered States, really fun movie, really cool sci-fi premise. If you're into or find like those isolation tanks really fascinating. This is definitely a movie up your alley. And it has a lot to do with that, but it has like this like sci-fi, almost horror plot to it. I had fun with it. It has one moment in the movie where you're really like, what the heck? It's like, it gets really B-movie at like one part, but like most of the movie is pretty like grounded. American Mary. This is a example of a movie. When I first watched it, I did not care for it really, but the more I watched it, the more I've enjoyed it. Some would say that this movie kind of has like a pretty anticlimactic ending, and part of me still feels that way, but the premise of this movie is fascinating. It's like this lady Mary goes to medical school. Basically something really horrible happens to her while she's in medical school and causes her to quit. And she kind of starts her own business with body modification, but like goes to really extreme levels with it. And part of it's kind of a revenge tale. So, I mean, but I really like this movie. This movie's really fun to watch. I would say if you're really sensitive to like, you know, basically there's a scene that involves sexual assault, and like, I hate watching that in movies. But it never goes like, it didn't make me want to turn it off, but obviously with stuff like that happens, it makes you want to see what they're going to do, especially if there's a revenge aspect to it. And this movie has that. So, but, you know, I've watched it a couple times, and each time I watch it, I like it a little more and more. American Psycho is classic. This movie is so quotable. I actually tried reading the book. I can't get into the book, and I'm sure the book is great to those who have read it. The reason I couldn't read the book was like the first 60 pages was just Patrick Bateman going into extreme detail about Suits. At least that's what I remember. If it wasn't Suits, it was something he just had this extreme fascination on, where he just wouldn't stop talking about it for like what felt like a third of the book. So I was like, I can't do it. I love the movie. I'll just watch the movie. Are You Afraid of the Dark? First season. I got this for Kelly because we both grew up with Nickelodeon and Are You Afraid of the Dark? And I think we've actually only watched a couple off of this this first season. I think we watched the first couple episodes, but this is one that's always like, if you're just in the mood for something spooky that, you know, at least scary for kids. Because when I was a kid, like some of this stuff scared the crap out of me. I mean, it's not on this season, but The Tale of the Dead Man's Float, that's about the one with like the swimming pool. It has the monster in it. And like, if you go back and watch that, you're like, that was on a kid's show? That's insane. But yeah, Are You Afraid of the Dark's a fun show. I love this movie. This is one of those movies that is, if you're really into just like morgue type stuff and like dissection and just the human body and human anatomy, you'll probably love this movie. And I just love that, you know, as the movie goes on, they find out more and more stuff about this corpse. And like, yeah, it's just fascinating. I mean, Brian Cox is great. I mean, he's great in most stuff. And it's funny, a lot of people didn't really know Brian Cox until the show Succession. And I'm like, dude, like, Brian Cox is great in everything. Like, and you're just finding out about this guy. Anyway. Babadook. Still, it doesn't hold up as well as I think it does. The first couple times I've watched it, I love this movie. And I still love The Creature of the Babadook. And I'm sure people will still refer to this as a classic for good reason. It definitely has that like iconic horror vibe of like a horror villain in it. And I do like what the movie has to say about a lot of stuff, especially with like dealing with grief and like depression and such. It's a cool way to kind of tackle that in like a horror movie monster fashion. Bastards of Young. This is like when I was really into like pop punk and emo music. I still go back to that stuff periodically. But this is actually a really cool DVD about those bands being, you know, like in their teens to like, you know, 18 to like 21 years old, and like them touring in like a bus, not even a bus, like just touring in a van, just smelling horrible and like playing these crazy shows. And I really love this DVD. I haven't watched it in quite a while, but it is pretty fascinating to just see, you know, these like super young bands just play like basements and travel around the country. It's cool. Bates Hill, season 1. I remember lending this to, I think I lent this to my sister, and my mom decided to write my name on it because apparently it belongs to me. You can see my name on it. But Bates Hill, I loved, especially the first season. Most of the show is pretty great. I would just say I hated the ending because the ending erases Psycho, basically. And I'm surprised no one had an issue with that whatsoever. I was just like, you guys realize this was a prequel to Psycho, and you literally erased what happens in Psycho from the ending. But anyways, Beetlejuice, the TV show, the cartoon. I watched this as a kid, and this is a Halloween Spooktacular, and this is a hilarious type DVD. I don't know how they pulled it off, but this has most of like the Halloween type themed episodes on here, but it only has like 2 or 3 of them out of like it says 8 of them is on this disc, but it only plays the first 2 or 3 episodes and then it loops it. And it's so weird because even if you select like episode 4 or 5 on, it repeats the first couple episodes. And so really you only get like 2 or 3 episodes on this whole thing when it says it's supposed to be 8 of them. But I got that for Kelly because she obviously is a Monster Beetlejuice fan. But, you know, after that happened, I was like, you know what, let's just get the entire series. And we have yet to watch through the whole series. And funny fact, you can't find this on any streaming platform whatsoever. Even if you go on like YouTube, it's not on YouTube either. And YouTube has a lot of like free stuff you can watch that people have uploaded and it hasn't been taken down. But Beetlejuice is one of the shows that's not on a single streaming service. At least the time I'm recording this, I'm pretty sure it still does not have a streaming service like showing this. So, you know, buying the DVD was kind of the way to go. But this is a type of show that I love it, but it really is not binge-worthy whatsoever. It is pure bonkers and pure craziness 90% of the time. So it's one of those shows that after like 2 episodes, you kind of had your fill and you want to move on. Like, yeah, Beetlejuice, it's like, you know, how Beetlejuice is not really in the original movie, like next tier. Like, Beetlejuice is in like a total of 15 minutes of his own movie. And there's a reason for that, because he's so crazy. And, you know, the cartoon is like, it's constantly Beetlejuice there. It's Beetlejuice and Lydia basically as best friends. And that's a lot different from the movie, obviously. But classic movie. I actually never watched this until I met my wife. Like when we first started dating, I was like, I never actually seen Beetlejuice. So she showed me Beetlejuice. I bought her a copy. And yeah, I'm excited for the new one. I just really hope it doesn't get tarnished. Like, I mean, you can't take away anything from the original, but I'm hoping the second one is like kind of a cool extension. Like, I at least want to see Beetlejuice and be like, you know what? It was cool to see all those characters again. You know, I at least want that vibe. Bela Lugosi Horror Collection. I think I've only watched, I think one of these, White Zombie. But this has White Zombie, Bowery at Midnight, Invisible Ghost, Spooks Run Wild, The Devil Bat, The Corpse Vanishes, The Ape Man, and Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn Gorilla. That's a movie, apparently. But I've heard of Corpse Vanishes, and I've seen, like, the movie poster of that a lot, but yeah, he's pretty famous from the movie White Zombie, and of course you have the band White Zombie based off of the movie. But Bela Lugosi's great, obviously, for Dracula. Next, Beyond the Black Rainbow. This is a great slow burn movie. If you're not into slow burn movies, I would suggest staying away from it. But the guy, Panos Cosmatos, I think is his name. Panos Cosmatos, yeah, he's the one who did Mandy, which was a lot more popular than this one. But people who thought Mandy was slow, like, this is a new level of slow, but if you really just want to be in like a trance, definitely watch Beyond the Black Rainbow. Birdman, I remember buying this because I just really loved the one take type feel throughout the movie, and plus the score was just mostly like these jazz drums, but yet somehow worked. Like when I think of drums, I don't think that it could possibly score an entire film, but it kind of did. But yeah, this is a fun movie, and definitely got Michael Keaton like back in the spotlight. This is Lucio Fulci's The Black Cat. I think I watched this once. I don't remember a thing about it though, and I know it's supposed to be based on the Edgar Allan Poe tale. I don't remember it being very faithful to that. I mean, I consider myself a pretty big Poe fan, but I don't remember this being very faithful to the Poe story. But I do like Lucio Fulci, so I was like, you know what, I'll buy it. It's funny, a lot of these movies I bought when I worked for FYE. Black Christmas, this is the Black Christmas remake. I would like to own the original Black Christmas on DVD or Blu-ray. This is one of the few like horror remakes I actually like. This is a pretty trashy like early to mid 2000s remake. I still think it works though. And it's funny because like people hold the original in such high regard, including myself. But like still like this trashy remake I still kind of like. Black Swan, I don't think this is as good as people make it out to be. I remember at the time this came out, everyone was raving about it, and I thought it was good, but nowhere near as good as people were saying it was. I think Darren Aronofsky's a good filmmaker, but like, it's funny how many people like praise his movies like Requiem for a Dream, and especially recently The Whale. Good movies, but I was like, people don't mention The Wrestler. The Wrestler is his best movie by far. And like, it doesn't get, I don't think it gets the credit it deserves out of most of these, at least most of his movies. This pile of movies is about to like fall. I'm not sure why I put this. Oh, okay. I put it in B's. It's a triple feature, but it's because of Blood Gnome under the B's. But this has Blood Gnome, Satan's Little Helper, and Spliced. I've only seen Satan's Little Helper. That was the reason I bought this. I bought it when I worked at FYE. I spent a ton of my money at FYE, but that was long before I had responsibilities and such. Brain Dead, or also is known as Dead Alive. This was, yeah, a Peter Jackson movie, and if you know anything about Peter Jackson, you're like, oh, isn't that the guy that did Lord of the Rings? Yeah, it's the guy who did Lord of the Rings, and he did like one of the bloodiest, goriest movies ever. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I gotta start putting these, I have to put these on the floor now because I have no room. I might as well introduce both of these. Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. I wanted to do a video like talking about my favorite movies, but I would actually put both of these on that list of my favorite movies. Sometimes you just see movies that like just really speak to you, just completely, like you can't really explain it. It just evokes a feeling, and Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 do that. And it's funny, like most people who haven't been exposed to these movies, or they've only just heard of them, a lot of people probably don't think like, what's the big deal about these movies? And it's funny, for it being science fiction and being about like artificial intelligence and like cyborgs and like, you know, people that are mostly machines. It's funny how like these movies just show like what it's like being human, and like the way that the messages of these movies like come off with. And like, I mean, these movies are incredibly sad, but I love these movies. And yeah, I wouldn't have thought that like, I wasn't even exposed to Blade Runner at like a really young age. Like I only saw it like maybe as of the past number of years, maybe like the last 10 years, I watched it for the first time. And then 2049 came out. And then that also like really was an emotional gut punch. And yeah, I love these movies though. And you know, the character of Deckard, like, you know, he's kind of like, he's not the best like protagonist, I would say. And then you also meet him, you know, in 2049. He's like not even in the movie all that much. It's Ryan Gosling's character that's the protagonist of 2049. And God, yeah, his character, Ryan Gosling's character, Officer K, is just like, you can't help but feel so bad for him and everything. And like even Deckard as a character, Harrison's Ford character, like towards the end of the original, you know, you have that famous Rutger Hauer monologue of, you know, his Tears in Rain monologue. I'm gonna get emotional talking about it, but anyways, I love those movies, and yeah, they really speak to me. Blair Witch Project, groundbreaking movie at the time it came out. Part of me still loves this movie. I mean, it's been so influential for like young and like independent filmmakers. The fact that it's like you can make a movie where you don't show the main thing that's scaring you. You don't show it at all, and yet it works, and it terrifies so many people. And yeah, so on occasion I go back and just watch this, and plus this takes place in Maryland, and you know, I happen to be from Maryland, so when something takes place in the state of Maryland, like, it's more motivation for me to watch it. I usually want to watch that on VHS more than DVD though, but I do have the DVD. I've only watched this once, but I did laugh a good bit through it. Bubba Hotep, and it has Bruce Campbell and, you know, Evil Dead fame. You know, Bruce Campbell's hilarious, and this movie is very bonkers. The guy who directed Phantasm did this, and he also went on to direct John Dies at the End. If you've seen that movie's also very bonkers. But this is like, takes place where Elvis actually didn't die. Elvis is still alive, but he's in this hospital, and he has to deal with basically this dead creature, like the king of the dead, as he's called. And yeah, that's like the tagline, the king versus the king of the dead. I don't know, but I just remember being really bonkers, and I would totally rewatch it. But sorry, I'm like getting close to the mic and getting really loud. If I have all these like video ideas, and this next movie is like in that video idea where I just talk about like guilty pleasures. There's a lot of movies that like you can't help, like, I believe you should like what you like, but like if I were to title the video, I would have said like, you know, my favorite guilty pleasure movies. And this movie, Burying the X, would probably be on that list. I don't feel guilty for liking it. I just think, like, on a critical standpoint, this movie really isn't that good. But this movie is extremely fun and charming and stupid, but I love it because it's one of those horror comedies. And, like, I'm kind of a tough laugh with, like, straight-up comedies most of the time. But I find this movie pretty funny. And also, if you're a huge like horror fan, like there's so much for horror fans in this movie. Anton Yelchin, R.I.P. Him, Alexandra Daddario is in this as well. And she was in like, was it Mayfair Witches recently? But they're really, it's really funny because Anton Yelchin's character works at a Halloween store that's open year round. And you just don't see that ever. And whenever someone like walks into the store, he goes ghoul morning. And then after someone like buys something from him, he's like, thanks, go to hell. And there's a couple of moments in the movie where they're like, where do you get off? It's a silly movie though. It's like, you know, about a guy who's obsessed with horror, and his girlfriend doesn't care about that stuff at all. And she just drives him up the wall, and then he meets Alexandra Daddario's character, and she's like super into that stuff, super sweet. And then, you know, his girlfriend, and he goes to break up with her, and basically she dies, and then something crazy happens and she comes back from the dead. And, you know, Anton Yelchin's character is trying to just be like, I like this other girl, but my ex-girlfriend is literally dead and still trying to ruin my life. So it's a fun movie though. Butterfly Effect. Surprisingly, I've never seen this movie in full. I don't know. Call me a hipster. I don't really care. But like most of acquaintances and friends of mine were obsessed with this movie when it came out. That made me not want to watch it. And I still haven't. People say it's really good. I don't really care though. Shockingly, for a time travel movie, I never had the urge to watch it. Casino Royale. I'm not a big James Bond fan, but this movie's still incredible to me to this day. I still think this is the best James Bond movie ever made, and it's going to be hard to top it, honestly. I don't see it being topped. If it's not that, it's GoldenEye. GoldenEye was also one of my favorites. The Cat O' Nine Tails. This is a Dario Argento movie. Obviously, everyone knows him from Suspiria. Some of his other movies are pretty good, and this one is actually pretty fun. It's more of a detective story, but it's about all these murders that happen, and it's like this blind guy and this, a blind puzzle maker, and basically, this detective, like, try to solve these murders. And this was one of, I think Argento said himself he wasn't crazy about this movie. He likes that he made it, but he said it is his most American type movie, because obviously for being an Italian horror director. But I remember watching that and think it was really fun and silly. And there's a part towards the end of the movie where it's not like what happens to this person. It involves his hands and a rope. And if you can kind of put the two together, you like watch it, you're like, ow. I don't know, but that's just me, and that's like one of the most memorable parts from that movie. Channel Zero, love this series. I have yet to watch The Dream Door, but I have seen all the other 3 seasons. All of them are really good. I would say Candle Cove, this one, is the best and remains going to be my favorite. It's just a fascinating concept about a children's show that people kind of remember, but no one seems to remember. And yeah, just the concept of Candle Cove is fascinating. No End House, yeah, I really enjoyed as well. There's just like this weirdness to this show. This is basically my American Horror Story, where every season is a different story, but it's like for people who want something more than just the, typical American Horror Story stuff. I don't know. If you've heard me talk about American Horror Story on this channel, I have this weird, hate-watch relationship with that. Christine, really good Carpenter movie. One of his more underrated movies. About a haunted car, but yet it somehow works. And yeah, I think this is due for a rewatch, honestly. But yeah, I really love this movie. I think this is during the time when Carpenter would score most of his movies, along with directing them. And I think Christine was one of them. Christmas with the Cranks. I've talked about this in depth on the channel. I did a holiday horror edition of Christmas in July of talking about this movie. So you can check that out on the channel if you'd like. Cloverfish Killer, really good movie. This is one of those movies that my wife and I watched without knowing a thing about it and loved it. And this is one of those movies where if you don't know anything about it, but you're like, oh, it has to do with a serial killer, I'll watch it. That's all for the better. The less you know, the better about it. So I'll leave it at that. Conjuring, I still think it holds up pretty well. I don't like the Conjuring sequels all that much. I think James Wan was the one who kind of kept it the most grounded. Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. I love the story behind that, the true story behind it. But, I mean, the Conjuring movies now at this point are basically Marvel movies. They're like superheroes, Ed and Lorraine Warren. It's like, the first Conjuring, at least, they were still paranormal investigators. They weren't having these premonitions and communicating with the dead and such. Coraline. I actually really haven't watched this in full, but everyone says how creepy it is, and I've seen a lot of the imagery and, the button eyes and everything. I just haven't really sat down and watched it, honestly. But maybe I will someday. Another, Tim Burton one, Corpse Bride. I enjoy Corpse Bride. I think this movie works best because of its length. It's like A Nightmare Before Christmas. It's like an hour and 10 minutes. So it's all the better because of how short it is. Carl Sagan's Cosmos, incredible TV show. If you're even remotely interested in outer space and just how we came to exist, Obviously, you have the Neil deGrasse Tyson version that came out, you know, a number of years ago, and he even did like a second season of that. Neil deGrasse Tyson is also great, and because obviously he was taught by Carl Sagan with all this stuff. But if you really just watch, if you watch this, there's just so much passion that goes into this, especially Carl Sagan's delivery as the narrator and talking about everything. I don't know, it's just a fascinating watch. You just have to really be into, you know, like how we came to exist in the universe and outer space and planets and stuff. If you're not into that stuff, you're going to fall asleep while watching this, but falling asleep to this is not a bad thing. It's a pretty calming TV show. Crash, yeah, all about racism. I watched it with Kelly a couple of years ago, but I had never seen it, but this is actually Kelly's copy. Actually, some of the movies in this collection are from Kelly. Creature from the Black Lagoon, awesome Universal monster movie. This is one of the later ones that came out. I would say actually one of the last like iconic horror characters of the Universal monster era, but still holds up really well. Yeah, when we watch this on Blu-ray, it's a great watch on Blu-ray. Great. It just looks awesome. Like, for a Universal Monsters movie, it looks really nice on Blu-ray. Sorry, I gotta take a sip of my Pepsi. I'm getting thirsty here. I've been talking a while. Creed, first one, not the band Creed, but you know, spin-off of the Rocky movies, with Apollo Creed's son. I do like Creed 2 a good bit. I haven't watched Creed 3. I don't know if you want to chalk it up to, like, you know, Stallone isn't involved. Rocky's not even in Creed 3 or anything. But it was like, that wasn't a surprise, because the end of Creed 2, it kind of was like a send-off for Rocky, being like, Sylvester Stallone was kind of just like, all right, I don't really need to be in these anymore. So, yeah, he kind of went off. And Creed 3, I mean, I heard good things. I heard some whatever things about it, but I didn't really have a lot of interest. Like, once Rocky kind of left the picture, it's like you can kind of give or take, you know, without Rocky in it. So, but the first Creed is really great. And I actually went out to the movies by myself to watch this at the time it came out. Like, and I would never do stuff like that, but I went out by myself to see Creed in theaters, and I don't regret it whatsoever. I was like, hell yeah. I was like so pumped, like, you know, in my theater seat, you know, during the training montage and everything. So, Creepshow, it's funny, one of the shorts being called Father's Day. I'm actually recording this on Father's Day, but Creepshow, I've talked about the VHS on this channel, so I'll keep it short, but classic movie. I've also talked about Creepshow 2 on this channel, classic movie as well. Very different vibe from the original Creepshow, but I still recommend Creepshow 2. Has 3 shorts instead of 5, like the first Creepshow. Crimson Peak, I've always had a fascination with this movie. I've always just had a fascination with Gothic type stuff in general, and this is very much a Gothic romance. This was marketed very much as a horror movie, and while it does have horror aspects to it, a lot of people were disappointed by this movie because it wasn't a straight up horror film. It was more of a Gothic romance. And, you know, if you know Guillermo del Toro, he's like a very sophisticated horror filmmaker. Like, if you've seen The Shape of Water. The Crow, I'm pissed they're now releasing a remake of The Crow. I mean, they've tried to remake The Crow for like decades, and they're finally remaking it. I saw the trailers in the new one, and I'm like, I love Bill Skarsgård, dude, but like, this looks like discount Joker film. Like, it just looks terrible. And I hope the paycheck was good, man, because I don't care to see it. I'm not going to go see it. And I can't imagine that people are going to like it. I feel like most people hold the original Crow in such high regard with Brendan Lee. That is his legacy movie. And I mean, if Brendan Lee had anything to say about this being remade, I think he made his voice heard, because there was so many production issues with a Crow remake happening. So, I don't know. But, you know, I call it the curse of the Crow, because they weren't successful with any sort of like remake getting off the ground with it, except until now. and now people are just completely chastising it, myself included. The Cure trilogy. I still consider The Cure one of my favorite bands. Every time I go back and listen to one of their records, obviously some are like way top tier, some are not so good, like their self-titled album I don't think is very good. But this is a live show of a trilogy of their albums, and this is like during the gothic Cure era, like kind of I would call the depressing era of the Cure. But they do the albums Pornography, Disintegration, which is one of my favorite records ever, and Bloodflowers, which I actually would say Bloodflowers is also one of my favorites by The Cure. That album is kind of give or take, though. Some people love it, some people don't care for it at all. But I love all three of those albums, and it's really cool to have that on DVD for that whole concert. Getting towards the end, I promise. We're in D's now. Dark Shadows, the Tim Burton movie, it's not very good. I've actually given this multiple chances. I don't think it's a good movie. And there's so much I want to like in this movie, and I just don't. Probably because I've watched the TV show pretty extensively. I mean, it's a soap opera, and there's like over 1,000 episodes of the original Dark Shadows, but I watched a good like 300-400 episodes of that. And yeah, I mean, granted, a lot of people would watch the original soap opera and be like, it's so dated, but I mean, Jonathan, who plays Barnabas, is so freaking charming, and I like Johnny Depp a lot, but I don't think he really works as Barnabas Collins. And also just the way the whole thing was written, it was like, Tim Burton was a huge fan of the original show. It just doesn't work here because he tried to make it like funny and not straightforward, and I just think that made it way worse than it was. But it was cool seeing Jonathan Frid make an appearance in this movie. And he died like a year later. It was crazy. Kelly and I have not watched this, but I think we bought this from Goodwill, but Dead and Breakfast. It's like a bad horror movie, only worse. As you can see, we still have this plastic seal on it. We haven't watched it yet. I don't know if we ever will, honestly. But we bought it based off just the title, Dead and Breakfast. The Descent, great horror film. I would say it's a classic horror film at this point. A lot of people have issues with the ending to this movie, but that really depends on the ending you end up seeing. Most people have seen the American version where, like, it is kind of the happy ending, but the original ending is the ending I prefer, where it's like, you're gonna watch a horror movie, you think your ending might be something horrific. I don't know, to me, that feels more real and comes from a more real place. That's just me, though. That's the ending I prefer, the not-so-happy ending. Death Trap, I have not watched this. I think Kelly bought this. Haven't watched it. It has Michael Caine in it, though, and Christopher Reeve, and they're both great actors. I haven't watched it, though. Dodgeball. Speaking of different endings, if you look up anything about this movie, Dodgeball, and its original ending, I think you can find the original ending of it on YouTube. The original ending, it's kind of funny. It also makes no sense, but actually, I don't know. It kind of does make a little bit of sense. But basically, the original ending of this movie did not fly well with test audiences, so they changed it to a more Hollywood ending. But the way this movie ends, like the way the original end is, it's more realistic. You're like, this could have not paid off, I'll just leave it at that. Okay. These two are the same, but one's DVD and one's Blu-ray of Donnie Darko. So I have DVD, I have the Blu-ray, I also have a VHS of Donnie Darko, but I would still consider Donnie Darko to be one of my favorite movies ever. It just is. It came at a time in my life. I mean, the reason a lot of people like latch on to Donnie Darko still is because at the time that they had watched it in their life. If you're like an adolescent, like a teenager, and you see the movie, it's a great coming of age tale that's kind of wrapped into a time travel movie. So, but I've talked about that extensively on the channel. I've done a VHS review of Donnie Darko. So Last one, my wife's home with the groceries, but last one is the Dracula collection, Bela Lugosi. This has Dracula, Dracula's daughter, Son of Dracula, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and then Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. I've only seen Dracula and Dracula's daughter. I will get around to the other ones later though, but I actually really love Dracula's daughter. It's been a little bit of time since I've seen it, but I remember when I watched Dracula's daughter, and for a movie called Dracula's Daughter that doesn't even have Dracula in it, I really dug it. And, you know, for how iconic Bela Lugosi's performance is in Dracula, you know, a movie that has Dracula in the title and doesn't even have Dracula in the movie, it surprisingly works. But like I said, I've been talking for like 45 minutes right now, and I only got through the numbers to the letter D on this video. So I'm going to wrap it up there, but there's other videos that are going to come in this series. I don't know whenever I can get to it, but I hope you all have enjoyed this extensive video. If you have, give me a thumbs up. It's greatly appreciated. Subscribe to Love Bats and the Belfry. I tend to be all over the place, but I'm mostly a horror guy at heart. So if that's your thing, definitely hit that subscribe. We greatly appreciate you tuning in, and I will see you in a future video. Bye.